Welcome back to Monday Night Bible Study. It is a new year, and we're here together, and we're going to continue our march through Exodus. We're in chapters 21, 22, and 23 today. And on my way out the door, I've got kids. School starts again later this week, and I've got my sons. Both of them have kids spending the night, whatever. And in the hustle and bustle, I forgot my MEV, my Modern English Version. So I'm going to use the English Standard Version, an old cheap paperback version of the Bible, because the Bible is the Bible. You know, the word doesn't change, right? So I'm gonna use the ESV today. If you're using King James or using whatever it is that you've got, NASB or any of that kind of stuff, follow along. I'm going to be in the ESV, English Standard Version, and we're going to be in chapters 21, 22, and 23, and we're going to go through this together. Again, if you haven't, as a reminder, there is some information available to you at bradflack.com/Exodus. And I've got some pictures and some charts and stuff for today's lesson, talking kind of an outline of the stuff that we're going to be talking about. It kind of breaks it down into an outline because there's a lot of words here, 3 chapters worth, but you can kind of summarize them in these bullet points. And so I've kind of done that on bradflack.com/Exodus. If you're watching online with us, you're probably already on bradflack.com/Exodus. All right. Now, these are the rules that you shall set before them. Hold on, before I go into there. Remember, chapter 19. I'm sorry, I forgot to do this. Chapter 19, gather all the nation, gather all the people, make them wash their armpits, make them get their laundry done, get them in clean clothes, get them to the base of the mountain, and meet God. And God shows up in power and might, lightning and smoke on the top of the Mount Sinai there. And I've actually got a video for you to watch. If you haven't, go back to look at chapter 19 on bradflack.com/Exodus, and you'll see a video where they've actually found the Midian Mount Sinai, and the top of the mountain is literally burnt. And they pick up rocks like this, and it's black on the top, and they look underneath, and it's the color of the rest of the mountain underneath the rocks because it was burnt, and it's still there. So go look on there. You'll see those are cool little videos that I'm sharing with you guys. I love it, that kind of stuff. I hope you do too. So that's chapter 19. Chapter 20 is sort of the wedding vows. Remember, we kind of talked about that 19 is the wedding ceremony, and then 20 is the vows. And instead of saying the commandments, it's really just say this is the covenant between us. And God says, just like to take, to have, and to hold, for better or for worse, till death do us part, have no one else besides me. Don't cheat on me. I mean, look at what's chapter 20. It says, I'm the Lord your God. He brought you out. I'm telling you who I am. It says, have no other gods before me. No other gods except me. Don't cheat on me. Like, you go through it looking at it that way, and you've got 4 vows between the people of Israel, the Hebrews, the Jews, and God. And then the last 6 are, how do you treat each other?
How to love God is the first half.
That's right.
How to love man and your neighbor is the second half.
So when they asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Because they're thinking, okay, we got 693 or however many it is. And then we know there's 10, the kind of premier 10. Which one's the greatest commandment? And he said they can be summed up in 2 things. Love the Lord your God with everything you got. Love your neighbor like yourself. And that's what those first 10 actually do when you break it down like that. So, all that being said, God is still talking to Moses here. We're in chapter 21, and this is what God is giving to Moses. Now, I want you to pay attention to something here. I want you to count how many times we read, listen, Moses. I want you to write this. Listen, Moses. I want you to tell them, okay? Chapter 21. Now, these are the rules that you shall set before them. He's talking to Moses, but he didn't say Moses' name there. You will set before them, the rest of the people, right? When you buy a Hebrew slave, right out of the gate here, this is a little controversial. What did he say 1 chapter ago? What does chapter 20, verse 2 say? Exodus 20, verse 2. What's it say?
And the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage.
Out of the house of bondage. Out of slavery, mine says in ESV. And here we see in chapter 21, verse 2, What does it say?
A Hebrew servant, he shall serve 6 years, and the 7th
Yeah.
free and pay nothing.
I just set you free, but you could still be a slave. I just set you free, but you could still be a slave. That's interesting. We're going to come back to that, okay?
You talking about mindset? You don't come in with a poverty mindset?
No, a physical slave.
Okay.
You can become enslaved again, and we're going to talk about that in just a couple minutes. So when you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. Now, I'm going to draw you a little chart here because I like charts and stuff. You know that. And oops, my markers. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. You tracking with me here? All right. So I just made 10. It doesn't matter. Okay. So I'm going to buy a Hebrew slave. How long can they be a slave?
6 years.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're no longer a slave here, right?
Wait, I'm missing something. Why 6 years?
That's what it says.
21, chapter 2. Okay. I just now had to reload my Bible.
That's okay. Now, let me ask you a question. If I bought 2 Hebrew slaves, I'm being very practical, and this is just, I'm being analytical. I'm being a dork, okay? But if I bought 10 Hebrew slaves, because I'm a wealthy Hebrew, and I've got 10 Hebrew slaves, okay? Or 12. 12 is a magic Hebrew number, okay? I got 12 Hebrew slaves. I have 12 of them. I bought them all right here. What happens in year 7?
They all go free, right?
They all go free. So if I'm a businessman, what am I going to do?
Buy as many as you can. Stagger it.
Right? I'm going to make it where if I'm going to have slaves, and the word slaves, we're going to go over that in just a minute. If we're a slave, 6 years, 7th year, that one's free. So then, if I know that one's going to be free, I want to make sure I have one that's in there.
Oh,
So
you're going to wait to buy them each year. Then
yes.
prolong still, right?
Yes.
I got you. That makes sense.
Okay. Now that's just me being a dork.
No, that's very smart.
I didn't know that would be an option.
I wouldn't either, but it probably was.
Well, it's from the time you bought them, 6 years. It didn't say from this moment you only count 6 years.
It's whenever you buy them, it's 6 years.
And the slave was the same price as a camel.
Slave was listed.
And a camel was the same price as a sword.
A slave or a servant is 30 pieces of silver.
Did they call them like denarius or something like that?
In the New Testament, they call them denarius, but it's 30 pieces of silver.
How much did Judas give up Jesus for?
Great question.
30 pieces.
Wasn't it 30? Yeah.
So in that mindset, Judas Iscariot was saying, your worth to me, Jesus, is you're a slave. Yeah.
That's kind of an insult to Jesus, wasn't it?
It's an insult to Jesus. But you know what? He didn't come to be served. He came to serve.
That's what he was there for.
And that's the word for slave that we're using. We have an Americanized antebellum kind of mindset about slavery. But historically, slavery's gone on for thousands and thousands of years, okay? And it is much more domesticated and friendly than that version that we talk about, okay? So the word slave that we're using is actually the word for an indentured or debt-owed servant. They're there because they owe you a debt. Or because you have paid, they were unable to be free on their own. So you've basically paid the price for them to be into your family. They're not equivalent to your wife or your children, but you're paying the price for them to be included in your family. Which, fast forward, Jesus paid the price, right? So that's the ransom, right? That's the debt. Okay, so let's continue. That was verse 2. Okay. If he comes in, if the servant, I'm going to use the word servant because that's really the probably closer translation for our mindsets. It is a slave, They can't just like run away. Like I have a servant who's, the butler. The butler goes, I quit. I'm out of here. Like they couldn't do that. They were kind of in a situation, but they were treated as a part of the family.
I don't think it was like Hollywood. I mean, why would you beat a man while he's working?
Correct.
Or a good worker.
Correct.
That makes no sense.
No. Correct.
Exactly why.
No.
Hollywood.
So 21 verse 3, if the servant comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. He's like, not breaking up the family. Okay? Or not breaking up the marriage, I should say. If the master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be the master's, and he shall go out alone. So he's saying, at the end of the 6 years, my master gave me a wife. So let's draw it. My master gave me a wife here. So I have this wife and kids. But guess what? I'm now done. My red X is now I'm done here at this location. I'm now a free man, or I've been sent off. I still am in debt, so I'm going to another person to continue paying off debt, or whatever the case is. He can then leave, but his wife and children must remain.
For how long? 7 years?
For 6 years, and on the 7th year, the wife can leave. Verse 4. So you have a motivation then for your servant to kind of hang around at that point.
Everyone got you.
Yeah. Let's continue. Verse 5. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master. And why would you say that if they were beating you and whipping you and not giving you food, not giving you shelter, not taking care of you, etc.? I love my master, I love my wife and my children. I will not go out free. Okay, that's just the scenario we just talked about. Then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall bore or pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall be his slave forever. Now, that sounds pretty foreboding. But here's the key part of that. Look in verse 5, 21 verse 5. What's the first thing that the servant says? I love my master. I love my master.
Yeah, that's pretty freaky, isn't it?
We're not talking about somebody who's beaten down, abused.
He's willingly staying.
We're talking about somebody who is being taken care of, who's being included in the master's family, who's being... We're talking about someone who is being taken care of, okay? Now, what he's doing here, is what we call a bond servant. What is a bond in real life? What is a bond? No.
A contract.
Yeah. A bond is a contract that says, I've been put in jail for something, and you're going to let me free from jail, but I have a contract that I will surrender this amount of money and still go to prison or whatever, still come back to get arrested or whatever. But you let me out for $25,000. When I come back, you're going to take a portion of that and give me my money back. If I don't show up, you keep the $25,000 and you come hunt me down for,
Right. Yeah.
So the bond is this: I willingly place my future in your hands if you give me this freedom, this ability to have a choice. Does that make sense? So a bond servant is someone who says, I love the master. I love the master. I willingly put myself underneath that master. And then this whole business about punching through their ear, they were making earrings cool before, the 80s, it was kind of a... but there's a reason for this. And what it is, when you look at what Paul says, and this is actually on bradflight.com/Exodus, under chapter 21, 22, 23. I have this in there. But if you look at the word in the Greek that Paul uses when he says, I have been marked as a bondservant of Jesus. That word marked there is the word stigma. You ever heard of stigmata?
Yeah, that,
What is stigmata? Do you know?
it's, it's the feeling of Jesus' hands being pierced, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. So the stigma, the sticking through, the poking through, okay? The stigma is what he is saying. So why is Paul saying this? They translate it as the mark of a bondservant of Christ, but he says it's sticking, the stick through. It's because he's going back to this tradition where a bondservant is putting a physical scar in their ear that everybody walking around can see them and say, that dude was free and chose to stay with that master.
It's like a shaming type device, maybe.
It'd be the opposite.
Brandy.
Or brand, there you
That's
go.
what I was
Thanks,
afraid.
That's a better term.
But it's not a forced, it's not a coerced, it's not a mandated thing. He chose to do that.
Like Jesus chose to die on the cross.
That's right.
Yep. Amen.
So he says, I want to be identified with this master. I want to stay with this master. I love this master. And so he's going to have his ear gauged. He may have an earring going through there or whatever the case is. I don't know how big of a nail he's using to go to the doorpost. Now, there's a reason that's at the doorpost too. Work with me for a second. Right? So this is there's the home, right? And they would have maybe some pieces of wood, maybe around the entrance there to hold it open, but mainly they're going to be made of stone, typically. But they'll have wood around the door frame there. And if you have served your 6 years or you've paid your debt, that 7th year, what happens?
You get released. Set free.
Set free. When you're in prison and you get set free, do you just sit down in your cell and like, all right, guys, what are we doing now? Playing cards? What's happening? What do you do? You're running for the door, aren't you? You're out. So by piercing your ear, taking on that scar, you're choosing to identify with the master of that house. And you're saying, I had a choice to run out that door to what I perceive as freedom. I choose to stay here. I choose to dwell here.
Their doors spoke a lot because that's where they would pin the word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Doorposts.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
So I wonder what else they put on the doorposts.
I don't know.
Be interesting to find out.
Be interesting to find out. All right, so that was verse 5 and 6. Okay, let's go to verse 7 now. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, again, that's I think a poor translation given the actual definition. Let's just say a servant. Okay. When a man sells his daughter as a servant, she shall not go out as the male servants do. If she does not please her master, who has designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has broken faith with her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her as with a daughter. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. And if he does not do these 3 things for her, she shall go out for nothing without payment or money. So, let me work with you for a second here. We have a situation where maybe, Bob over here is friends with Steve, and Steve's got a 10, 11, 12-year-old, a blossoming preteen or something like that. They're getting married maybe in the mid-teens or something. And she's a couple of years from, and he's like, hey, I'd like to marry her, but she's too young for me to marry. But I'd like to basically prepay the dowry and pay you for her. And she will be a part of my family. Remember, we talked about this is not a beating, whipping situation. He's incorporating her into the family. How do we do things? How do we make meals? How do we, what do we eat? Well, Tuesdays is always tacos and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I'm going to incorporate her into our family. And then when the time is right, I will then take her as my wife. Or Bob's older Bob's maybe like his age, and he's got a son who is marrying age, and says, I'm going to bring her into the house as a servant, but in a few years my son will marry her. And then
That makes sense, yeah.
that makes sense, right? Or the third option is I take another wife. I'm into brunettes and she's a blonde. I'm just not into blondes. So I'm going to go with the brunette over here. I brought her into my house. She's a servant. She's part of our family, but I'm not going to marry her. Then what it says here at the very end is number 10, verse 10. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. She has the ability to go out and get married to somebody else. And he has the obligation to provide for her. He's not kicking her out onto the street destitute. Does this sound like a slave driver? No. This is a master and a servant situation. And we have such a bad connotation with that in our current culture. But when I'm reading this is dripping with love. This is covered in grace. This is full of mercy and ripe with justice.
It's more like an employer/employee relationship.
Yeah, a little more like that.
Than an actual slave.
Now, let me ask you a question. We talked about 19, the wedding. Chapter 20 is the vows. 21 is a continuation. And who are we talking about? Right after the main vows, we're talking about a group of people. And these are the rights of this group of people. Who are we talking about? Not quite. I mean, they're Hebrew, so yes. We're talking about slaves, servants. God says, here's the vows. Here's the covenant. Don't cheat on me. Don't look it up. Don't have wandering eyes. Don't make another idol over there. Look at me. I'm your God. All those things. The 10 Commandments, right? We call them. But really, let's call the 10 vows for that covenant, right? And the next thing he talks about is the rights of servants who are not full-on autonomous beings. They have somebody kind of controlling them. But it's a loving situation. For me, I see this as a huge point to Christ with us. Right? He didn't come to be served. He came to serve. And to pay the ransom, or if you want to call it that, he paid the price, paid the debt for us, to purchase us. So technically, he is our master, our spiritual master. And we need to be diligent to Exodus 21 verse 5, the Lord. What does that say, Brian? Exodus 21 verse 5, the Lord.
But if the servant plainly says, I love my master, I love my wife, I love my children, I will not go out free.
Yeah. I make myself a bondservant to Jesus. I choose to do that. I have to do that. I have family and friends that are in the body, that are in this family, brothers and sisters that I love dearly. And we have all been paid for by this master, Jesus. Come on, line up. Line up. Let's pierce some ears. Are you guys feeling this? It gets me excited. I mean, Exodus 21, like this is some random part of the Exodus. Like,
I never heard of me off to the right man and not crazy, man.
yeah, yeah. And listen, this is the law that the Hebrews are supposed to follow. And the first thing out of the box, slaves, your servants, the ones that are working for you, that are not really your family, but they're kind of in your family, they got rights. They have rights. And here they are. God loves humans. God loves human life. And he doesn't see a servant or a master. He doesn't see a homeless person or a rich person. He doesn't see a moderately obese guy and a really in shape guy. He sees all of us. And that's what he's doing here. He is setting up that ordinance, that order in the kingdom. Remember, the first shall be last and the last shall be first? This is where it's happening. It's right here. All right. So let's go down here. We're in verse 12 now. I'm gonna move a little bit faster in some of this, but that for me was a really important section. You can see I took a lot of time on it. Some of them are a little more self-explanatory. Number 12. Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. So if I walk over, hey Brian, bam, you're dead. Then I get put to death. Pretty simple, okay? Verse 13. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. So what he's saying is, if I wasn't pre-planning, premeditating this murder, it just sort of happened, then I'm going to give him a chance to run free. Now remember, who is God telling this to? Who's God talking to in chapter 21 here? Moses.
That's right, Moses.
Does anybody remember what happened? Moses, something happened. What happened? Oh, he struck a guy. Was it premeditated? Was he lying in wait to kill that dude? No. But he struck him. He killed him. And then what did he do?
He tried to hide it in the sand or something like that.
Well, but then where did Moses go after that? He went to Midian. He fled to Midian. Wait a minute here. Let's read verse 12 and 13 again. I think I see a pattern happening here. Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, or if he didn't premeditate it for murder, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. Does this sound familiar to anybody else? Who's God talking to? Moses. And Moses knows exactly what he's talking about here.
Yeah, she does.
You can see Moses going like this.
Squirming.
Oh, okay. I got you on this one. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him from my altar that he may die. So if he's conniving, trying to figure out ways to scheme to kill somebody, take him out, get rid of him. Whoever strikes his father or mother shall be put to death. Okay? We lost that big time. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. So you're like, still what? Like kidnapping? No, like, wait a minute. If I'm a caravan and I'm going through southern Canaan and I find a young man in the bottom of a well who had maybe in nearby possession a coat of many colors, and I buy him and I drag him off and I enslave him and I sell him to other people at that point. Like, do you guys see? These are not like random things that he's talking about. He is specifically talking.
He's addressing these events.
Yes.
Yeah.
God is addressing the sins and the successes of the Hebrew people with the law. Isn't that awesome? Whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. When men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die but takes to his bed, then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time and shall have him thoroughly healed. So he's saying, we got into a fight, and I punched you, or I got a rock and hit you, and you're out for a day or a month or a year. You better get up. You better get up. And you know what I'm going to do? Well, look at that last part there. It says, And the end of verse 19. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time and shall have him thoroughly healed. So if we get into a fight and you end up in the hospital, who's footing the bill? Me. Right or wrong? I hit you, knock you out. I'm paying the hospital bill. Because there's motivation there. Why? I need to see you healed. I need to see you up, walking around. Why?
Well, it teaches you a lesson too, though.
Because if you don't, I get killed.
That's true.
If you do get up, then I pay you for lost wages, and I pay for your hospital bill.
That's why I look at the laws of Moses. They still apply today.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want you to know that the Hebrew people, these laws are like, you could say, hey, what comes after the Ten Commandments? And the Hebrew people will be, they're going to spit them out. They know the Hebrew law, okay? People that are devout Hebrews.
Very interesting, actually.
Yes, but here's the deal. I want you to remember, there was a story in the New Testament. Jesus gave a parable, and he's talking about a man lying, almost dead in the road. Do you remember that? Good Samaritan story. What were they under Hebrew law supposed to do with that man? But the priest walked on the other side of the street. Because if I get down there and I get dirty and I touch him and he may be unclean and this, then I've got to go through all the rituals. I don't have time. I don't have time for this today. I'm going. Right? And the one guy came in there and helped him. He was following Exodus 21, verse 20.
Right.
See how this is all connected? The Bible is not an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Bible is the first covenant and the complete covenant. When a man strikes his servant, I'll use the word servant here. Mine says slave in this translation, but we're going to use servant. When a man strikes his servant, male or female, with a rod, and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. So you're going to kill him. Now, I'm really not sure why the guy would be doing that unless he's a bad guy to begin with. Because what's your end goal, remember, 6 years and the seventh one, that guy's gone or gal's gone. I don't want people leaving. Let's just say I'm an agricultural tycoon and I got farms all over the place. I don't need people leaving. I got a personnel problem. High turnover rate. That's right. I'm looking for people to stick around. So how about I be a good master or a good employer, as you pointed out, where people want to work for me and want to stay, and you know what? They choose because they love me. Yeah. So I'm wondering if this person just has no clue, right? I'm going to guess somebody like this in verse 20 is probably not a very good business person, okay? So when a man strikes his servant, male or female, with a rod, and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, for the slave is his money. Now this is where it's a little bit slippery, because it's like, well, they survived for a day, and then they died from their injuries. Well, but he or she is technically my servant. So it would be the same. Work with me on this. This is a stretch, but work with me on this. It'd be the same as saying, I got mad because my John Deere tractor wouldn't start on me this morning, so I took my gun out and I shot it in the engine case.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Because now I can't do what I'm supposed to do because I've now taken out my farm equipment. But it belonged to me. But now I can't. So, do you get my point at all? It doesn't make any sense to do that. It doesn't make any sense to do that, okay? But it's technically his servant, okay? But if you'll notice, the proviso is if you strike him and he's dead, that means you're maliciously attacking. You're also maliciously attacking if they don't get up for a day or two as well. So I'm not sure, okay? Verse 22, when men strive together and hit a pregnant woman, So when two guys are fighting, but they end up hitting a pregnant woman, so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him. And he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay for life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot,
That's where that came from. I didn't
burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe.
I have no idea where that scripture was.
Now I'm going to ask you right now, who in verse 22 there, and 23, who is being harmed?
In verse 22.
Yeah.
They both are.
Technically, yes, both are.
I would say that.
But this is the first time that we see rights and a recognition of life legally given to a child in the womb.
Yeah, there you go.
What do you think about that?
I like it.
Take that to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
All right.
Roe versus Wade.
When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of the eye. If he knocks out the tooth of a slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth. I'm saying if it got to the point where this guy is beating his servants and causing physical damage to them, they don't need to be in his care any longer. And second of all, this dude's got to be a sinking ship of a wreck of a worker. I mean, I don't understand how you do that to people. When an ox, this whole next little section here, I had to read it a couple of times because it was kind of funny.
I kind of like 26 though. It gives you a nice way to, if you really had to be in a situation to, I don't believe in provoking, but if they kept on, go ahead, you can take my tooth, I'll be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gives you a way out.
I'll take the beating for the end result, right? The ends justify the means.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Do the Hebrews, do they actually follow these rules? Yeah.
Conservative Hebrews do.
There's some problem.
Progressive liberal Hebrews don't.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know how their laws were set up in Israel now. What if they reflected this?
They're more modern, the laws of the country, but the religious conservatives will still follow these. And it's like it says, part of the 10 Commandments, that vow is remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. No. The servant stuff is really kind of passe, but like, when you're looking back here in chapter 20 and it says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, which is 20 verse 8. There are still conservative Jews that will celebrate that. As a matter of fact, they have figured out how to find loopholes in it so they can do what they want to do, but still remain in remembering the Sabbath. They do what I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here. So what they will do is, if this is your house, you're not supposed to walk a certain number of feet outside of your house. Okay, so that means I kind of have a zone about like this that I can deal with around my house. Well, what they figured out was, what if us and our neighbors are really close, and I can just say that like I live kind of part-time with them because we're hanging out all the time, then that means that I could technically like include my neighbor's house as my domicile, my residence. So that way we can kind of still go between each other's houses. We're not technically breaking this law, but you get where I'm going here? And then they now, Manhattan has the largest one, and it's called an Eruv, and it is literally a wire that it goes from their house and encompasses all the area that they want to go to, and then comes back to their house. So that way they're still within their domicile. It's called an Eruv. And so look up You know what? I'll put it on the website. There's an article that talks about the largest one in the world in Manhattan, and it covers like 29 blocks or something like that. It's huge.
It's a temple, Jewish temple. Or...
It's their domicile. So that way they're not just sitting on their recliner at their house on the Sabbath day. They can actually like walk across the street and they can go.
Great. They know how to do it, don't they?
All right. So verse 28. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. So basically it's like you can't even enjoy a barbecue if this is a bad bull. Okay. So this is probably where the phrase, that's bad bull, where that comes from. Okay. The owner of the ox shall not be liable. So if your cow went crazy and stuck its horn into Scott's stomach and killed him, we'd kill the cow, Scott's dead.
Yeah, we can't eat the cow.
Chris is not liable, but we can't eat it. So we just destroy the animal. Okay? That's verse 28 there. Let's go to verse 29 then. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned, but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. So if Chris's cow has gored Brian and Scott and Brad, then Paula, you got to kill his ox, and you got to kill him.
How many stones would you have to throw to kill an ox?
Now you're thinking about like little stones. These are stones. They have a cliff, and they would put the animal or the person. If you were stoned to death, you'd put a person here, and they'd pick up these stones and drop them. They're trying to smash the head.
Sometimes they bury the victims with just the head sticking out too.
Well, that would be nice. They're a lot quicker than
Yes,
pebbles.
it's a little bit more humane than it sounds. It's still terrible, but it's not. It's not being pinged to death. You're looking for that knockout blow, is what you're trying to do. So they're picking up, 40, 50 pound, 60 pound, 80 pound stones, and dang, missed them.
Video game.
All right. If a ransom is imposed on him, he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to the same rule. If the ox gores a slave, a servant, male or female, the owner shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. What's the 30 shekels? Slave price. All right. Verse 33. When a man opens a pit, or when a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restoration. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead beast shall be his. He's paying for the animal, but then it's dead. He can't use it. That seems fair. When one man's ox butts another's so that it dies, that's not just talking about like being, like bumping hips. We're talking about these animals are full on.
This stuff must have happened to make law. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This had to occur all the time.
Oh, yeah, sure.
When one man's ox butts another's so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and share its price, and the dead beast also they shall share. So they're gonna have a barbecue. Like, hey, it sucks. My bull bested your bull, and it's dead. But I'm gonna split the cost of this bull with you. Then we're gonna have a barbecue, man. Let's be friends, like. If it is known that the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has not kept it in, he shall repay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his. Okay? So that's all of chapter 21. Y'all feel good about that? Okay, let's go to 22. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. Basically, this is a non-lethal, non-punitive response to theft. And what that means is a fancy way of saying, we're not going to put you in jail for the next 5 years. We're not going to put you to death. We're not going to whip you and beat you. You stole the sheep. You got to give this guy 4 more sheep. Well, that's expensive. Well, don't steal the sheep.
It's the Home Ruby Code. A lot of these lines. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you have to reimburse somebody 4 or 5 times what you've taken, you're probably not.
Yeah,
You're not going to take it.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a good way to do it.
It should be followed like in the New Testament.
This is the Old Testament. We're in Exodus. Are you in the right book?
I am.
Okay. Right. No, I'm just messing with her.
I'm for my trouble.
If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. What is this? Castle law. What is that? What's castle law? Castle law is I have the right to defend my house. I have the right to defend my castle. Self-defense.
But isn't there a different law if somebody breaks in at night?
Hold on. If they break in and you're just like, get out of my house, and you strike him and that guy dies, stinks, but I'm not liable for that. Okay. Now, let's go to verse 3. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in possession, whether it's ox or donkey or sheep, he shall pay double. So what he's saying is if it's nighttime and you're like, someone's breaking into my house, I don't know what his motives are, I don't know what he's got in his hands, I don't know what he's going to do to myself, my family, my animals, whatever, boom, I'm trying to stop him, oh, he dies. Okay, I'm not, no problem. But if the sun has risen on him, that means if he's doing this during the daytime,
You're supposed to give him what he wants.
you are supposed to stop him non-lethally. Or let him have what he has and then take him to...
Let him have it. That's what Hebrew law says.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder if they even had door locks.
I don't know.
I would say no.
They probably had curtains.
Well,
Camel skin.
Song of Solomon talks about unlocking the door and letting her beloved in.
Well, that's the house.
I'm just saying, that's why it just popped in my head about.
So non-lethal, you shoot him in the leg.
You know, the Texas law is kind of like that too. They're on their property.
Yeah.
At night. It's totally different at night. On the daytime, you can't do that because you'd be shooting the Amazon driver. The mailman, the UPS guy. You're not all pile of dirt. The meter man.
He's going to fall over all the packages.
You eat the all the time.
If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best in his own field and in his own vineyard. So, I let my sheep out, and it goes over there and eats all the Scott's bell peppers. Well, guess what? I've got to give him all the best of my bell peppers, which unfortunately is 0 bell peppers, Scott, so you're not going to get anything. If a fire breaks out and catches in thorns so that the stacked grain or the standing grain of the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution.
Yeah. You know the cool thing about these laws, I remember doing this a couple of years ago, gives you an insight of what life was like back then.
Yes. The thing it didn't address there is like lightning strike. What do you do if you can't ask anybody to pay them? It's just... If a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, which, I mean, I love you, but I'm not going to give you like $10,000 to hold on to while I go out of town. Like, but if a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God and show whether or not he put his hand into his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it's for an ox or for a donkey, for a sheep, for a cloak, or for any kind of lost thing, of which one says, this is it, that's it, he has it, the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor.
How would you prove that, man? That'd be hard to prove nowadays.
Well, they have judges. You remember Jethro gave counsel to Moses a couple chapters ago. Yeah. He goes, quit trying to do it all yourself, man. You're up like 22 hours a day. You can't live like this. Get a bunch of people and delegate this stuff, man. What are you doing? Get some judges set up, and they can deal with stuff one-on-one. They can deal with stuff, 4-on-4, and then 12 of them can meet together, and then 100 can meet together, or whatever. But you don't need every little, Tom, Dick, and Jane little argument that people have out there. And that was really, really good for Jethro that was wise for him. All right. So we're in verse 10 of 22. If a man gives his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep safe, so hey, I'm going to go out of town, Chris. Can you hang on to my sheep while I go out of town? Make sure that you water and feed them for me. So if he goes out of town, and it dies or is injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both to see whether or not he has put his hand on his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn by beasts, so if a bear or coyote or hyena, whatever, gets a werewolf, yes, gets a hold of it, let him bring it as evidence, and he shall not make restitution for what has been torn. Say, hey man, coyote got it. I don't know what to tell you. That stinks. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor's, and it is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee. So what he's saying is, if I go to Home Depot and I rent a small jackhammer for a home improvement project, and the jackhammer breaks, I'm not liable for it. It's just in the contract. But if I'm doing a project and a Home Depot employee with me and it breaks, I'm not liable for it. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor and is injured or dies, the owner not being with it shall make full restitution. If the owner is with it, he shall not. So if I lost it, if somebody stole it out of my hands and it wasn't in the contract that I didn't have to cover stolen property theft, then I'd have to pay for that jackhammer. But if the employee was with me, like, well, you saw it the same as I did. That guy walked over there and stole it. It wasn't like I hid it and trying to use this to make my own profit. It's gone. It's out of my possession. He's like, yeah, I vouch for you. Don't worry about it. That's where that's where in my mind where that kind of goes. Okay. Verse 16. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. Now, I will have to tell you this. When I read that, I asked my wife a question, and I said, can a man even seduce a woman? I mean, it seems like kind of like a...
Ask Magic Mike.
We're going to have prayer afterwards for Paula.
That's it.
I just thought that was a funny wording. Like, if a man seduces a virgin, I'm like, seriously? He might convince her. He might talk her into it. He might wear her down. But I don't know about seduces her. I mean,
Isn't that kind of the same thing?
The strong drink.
I don't know. I just thought that was comical. Maybe you think it's comical. Whatever.
It is.
If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price. So he's going to pay for her, right? And if her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. So, do you have a very good incentive to go around seducing virgins? No. Because I got to pay the price for her to be my bride, whether the dad allows it or not.
What's the price, 30?
Nah, it's whatever they agree on, and it's can be a lot. It's 30.
So really, he could go up to 5 if he wanted.
Yeah, it's 30 up to 300,000 or whatever. I don't know, but he has to pay it whether the dad agrees to let her marry him or not.
Wow.
You shall not permit a sorceress to live. I mean, that's one verse with one line there.
What is a sorcerer?
A witch, someone who dabbles in demons, demonology, witchcraft, sorcery, divinations.
God ain't playing with that.
No. I mean, it's very, very clear here. If someone is, you know,
One-liner, just for them.
that's right. If someone's, got kind of greenish skin and a mole on their nose, they're done.
Kind of like an angel of light.
Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death.
Another one-liner.
That's all. Wowzers. Yes, I wasn't going to say any names. I mean,
Bradford ain't here.
I know Bradford's not here to pick on. But it's like, that's in here. That means this is a problem.
Exactly. Trying to think about it.
Yikes. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord, that's Yahweh Jehovah there, other than to Yahweh Jehovah, shall be devoted to destruction. Okay? You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them, and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless.
Yes.
So, right?
Hammer down.
Yeah. I mean, we're not talking about, well, we're going to put them into some sort of social system, and we're going to rehabilitate him. No. Boom. You're done. Okay. If you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not exact interest from him. If you ever take your neighbor's cloak in pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. So he's saying, this is for poor people. Hey, this guy's really down on his luck. He's having a hard time. He's in between jobs. Hey, man, can I borrow $500? I got to keep the lights on or whatever. Okay, fine. Here's $500. Don't charge him interest, and don't hound him for it. Just, it's a gift.
I remember that law. I forgot about it.
It's a gift until he can, if he can ever, repay it back.
Don't send the mob after him.
Correct. Don't tell him he's got a. Right? So, but if you take his cloak in pledge, if you're like, okay, fine, I'm going to give you the $50 you need today, but give me that jacket. Okay, I got a jacket. It's 35 degrees outside. Right? So he says, if you ever take his cloak in pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. He's already a poor guy to begin with. How's he going to earn it back if he's sick or dead? How is he going to get that money back? For that is his only covering, and it is his cloak for his body. And what else shall he sleep? And if he cries to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. So we talked already about servants have rights. Women, do you think, have rights? People injured by other people or other property have rights. Unborn babies have rights. The poor have rights. Are you seeing a pattern here? Is God some white-haired, bearded figure with a lightning bolt in his hand, ready to exact his wrath upon humanity like we see? Like Zeus? No. God is loving and caring, and he sees to the smallest and least of us. Even in the Old Testament, which people say, oh, yeah, that was a harsh God, but there's a loving God here in the New Testament. Like, that was just the fulfillment of love in the New Testament. But it's been love the whole time, guys. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay to offer from the fullness of your harvest and from the outflow of your presses. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it will be with its mother, and on the 8th day you shall give it to me. Now, if you remember, there is the covenant of circumcision. What day are they supposed to do that?
How old? 8 years old? Or 12?
8th day.
The 8th day.
Yes, the 8th day after their birth.
Easier that way.
Yeah, the child won't remember that. So, he's the same thing. You consecrate those firstborn. For 7 days they'll be with their mother. And then that firstborn animal, is now a sacrificial animal. to sacrifice, because you'll have other ones after that. But this first one is mine. And so your sons, 7 days they're going to be with their mother, and on the 8th grade you consecrate, you covenant them with God. See, there's pattern, there's order, there's purpose behind what God has set out. You shall be consecrated to me, you, the people of Hebrews, right? The Hebrew people, the Israelites. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. Basically, if you're from Louisiana or East Texas, it's don't eat no roadkill. That's right. No roadkill stew, no roadkill barbecues. Okay, don't eat it. All right, we're into chapter 23. This is going to be the last chapter for tonight. Hopefully, you guys have got some new appreciation for Exodus. The stuff here, and as I'm going through it, I'm like, okay, here we go. It's a bunch of the stuff, But as I'm reading, I'm like, that's actually, wow, that's cool. That connects to that.
Well, you've already read the whole Bible, right?
Well, over my life, yeah.
I mean, so that's like me. I've read it all, but
You can't
it's so
retain
much.
all that.
Yeah.
No,
You go back and say, oh my gosh.
and I didn't go into this sort of depth with it whenever I was reading through it. I'm just reading through it like a novel. I'm not actually breaking down, chewing on it. That's right.
Watch the living word.
That's right. That's right. All right, so chapter 23 here. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. So basically saying, don't be a false witness. So if I'm like, okay, Chris, we're going to say that we saw him going into the strip joint, and you're going to say that you also saw him going to that strip joint, okay? That's what they're talking about. Don't be a malicious witness, a false witness against somebody else, okay? You shall not fall in with many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit, siding with the many so as to pervert justice. No mob mentality.
No riots.
No rioting. I'm just calling it out like I see it here. Nor shall you be a partial to a poor man in his lawsuit. Don't just say, well, he's a poor guy, let's be lenient on him. Like, if a poor guy did something, the poor guy's liable for it.
Right.
If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, whose ox?
Your enemies.
Ooh. So what you're telling me is if Joker and Batman had farms, and Joker's sheep got out, Batman, under this Hebrew law, would be forced to return the sheep to Joker's pasture. Yeah.
Your dog.
Yeah. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under its burden, because it's so heavy, you shall refrain from leaving him with it, and you shall rescue it with him.
Yeah, it really does teach love on it.
You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor in his lawsuit. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent and the righteous. For I will not acquit the wicked. And you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a sojourner. You know the heart of a sojourner. You were sojourners in the land of Egypt. All right, verse 10, chapter 23. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the beasts of the field may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyard and with your olive orchard. So let's stop there for 1 second. So, let me get the... So I want you to see this same thing as the slaves being set free. If you're a good business person, we're talking about Exodus 23 Hebrew business class. That's where we are right now. So if God is saying, okay, I've got 10 acres of land here. Okay? I've got 10 acres of land. And so I have this field here and here. And I have this field here and here. And I have this field here and here. and here and here. So I've got it broken down into, what is that? 1.5 acre, 1 3/4 acre plots, whatever it is. Okay. Or wait, 2.25 acre plots. 2.25 acre plots. Doesn't matter. The point is, if this one starts in year 1, I would choose to let, I would do this year 1, and I might let these two lay fallow. And then in year 2, this one will go, this one will go, this one will go, this one will go. And maybe I'll let this one go and this one go. And then in year 2, I'll plant here. And then in year 3, I'll do like this. So I'm giving myself space. And then I'll take a year off here. I don't have to wait 6 years. But if I'm a good business farmer from the Hebrew law, I'm going to stagger it where I don't have 0 fields.
They're all going to leave at one
I'm not going to leave all at one time. I'm going to break them down into. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? No, it's not a perfect.
Each year you're going to hire at least one of the
Yeah. As far as the servants go, I'm gonna get somebody new each year, so that way when the other ones are leaving, if they choose to leave, hopefully they don't, because I'm treating them right, but they might. All right. And if you notice here in verse 10, it says that the poor of your people may eat. So it's not that nothing will come up. Scott, when you have your garden with all your peppers going there, when you harvest them and you have some that maybe fall off or whatever, will you have a plant that come up, kind of a stray plant that comes up? Yeah, all the time. Okay. So what they're saying is that fallow year, don't turn it over. Just leave it. Don't touch it. Because whatever does come up, the poor people are allowed to go and harvest from that.
Isn't that like Boaz?
Boaz.
That's actually another law, which I don't know where it is, but it's another law where the fields are like this, and it says harvest. It's a combination. It's that, and it's this. It says harvest your fields in a circle, and let the poor take the corners.
Yeah, that's in Ruth.
Yeah.
Raise the roof.
Raise the roof. I love it. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. So this is not just for you. Like, hey, I'm going to sit in my luxury recliner here and check out what's on the TV while everyone else is still working out there. Everybody stops on the Sabbath day. Okay? Pay attention to all that I've said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips. You think he's serious about that? 3 times in the year you shall keep a feast to me. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, which begins the week of Passover. Okay, so that's Easter, if you want to look at it that way. As I commanded you, you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time of the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Egypt, which is the Passover. None shall appear before me empty-handed. So you got to bring some sort of offering. Okay. You shall keep the feast of harvest, of the first fruits of your labor, of what you sow in the field, and you shall keep the feast of ingathering. So what these are is the planting season, which is the feast of unleavened bread. Let me use abbreviation here. The feast of unleavened bread, that's Passover, which is what we call Easter. Okay? You tracking with me? That's normally in the spring, and it has to do with the full moon after the blah, 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 blah. Okay? I'm not going to get into all that stuff today. Then, 50 days later, we have what's called the Feast of First Fruits, Feast of the Harvest. And this is the barley harvest. And it's 50 days after this one. So 50 days, we have this one. And then we have, at the end of the season, we have the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's where we would go out into the field, and we would have these little huts that we would make with no roof as we're gathering from our crops. And those are the three that in the the Mosaic law here is saying those three must be observed. Now, if you'll remember, if this is Easter, this is 50 days later. What is this? Yep. So the unleavened bread is a signal, is a symbol of no sin. What happens at Easter? He's crucified. He pays the price for sin, and he rises from the grave, so we don't have that sin over us any longer. 50 days later, what happens? Acts chapter 2. The arrival of the Holy Spirit, the first harvest of the church. And then the Feast of Tabernacles, in the harvest, the Tabernacles, he's going to tabernacle with us. And what they're talking about is what we're going to get to in the next couple of chapters, talking about the tabernacle tent itself, that God is going to dwell among the people. And so the Feast of Tabernacles at the end of that season is a signifying that Christ is going to come and be among his people. He's going to live among us. So right here in Exodus chapter 23, a random backwater chapter of the Bible, we see three feasts laid out, what's required for the Hebrew people, and those immediately line up with the movement of Jesus and the Holy Spirit in the coming church. So let's see here. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened. So you could eat a sacrifice. There are some that you can eat. They would kill it and sacrifice it and then have barbecue, basically. But any of the blood that was on the altar, you can't have any of that blood or any of that meat with something that had yeast in it. It had to be unleavened, even if it wasn't the time of the Passover. And there's a special place that made that bread, also called the showbread. They made it for the tabernacle, for the temple, and for the tabernacle. But for the temple, and it was made in a specific place. The same place, actually, where the firstborn perfect lambs were being born to be sold at the temple. There's a town about 6 miles south of Jerusalem where perfect lambs and the bread of the temple were made. And it's Bethlehem. Bethlehem means town of the bread. And that's why there were shepherds there guarding their flocks by night. They were guarding the flocks that were raising the sheep to go to the temple. When Jesus was wrapped in swaddling clothes, it wasn't swaddling clothes, it was strips.
The swaddling was the brand.
It was strips of cloth that the temple provided to wrap the firstborn sheep as they came out to consecrate them and set them apart.
Basically, if you compare to our stockyards.
Yeah.
For cattle.
Yeah. So Jesus was wrapped in the same cloths as the sheep who were destined to die at the temple as a sacrifice.
Isn't that amazing?
I love it, man.
So the symbolism was there from the
Yeah.
There are no coincidences.
Oh, there's really not.
There is nothing an accident.
It's premeditated.
Long ago premeditated.
You shall not offer blood of my sacrifice with anything unleavened, or let the fat of my feast remain until the morning. So burn it up. Keep the fire going until all of that burned up. The best of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. So don't simmer it in its mother's milk. I didn't know. I'm like, what kind of recipes are we talking about here? Well, think about it this way. Have you ever had something that was like a cream-based soup?
Marinated.
No, think about like a cream-based soup.
Like a cream sauce.
A cream sauce.
Yeah. Well.
And it had...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clam chowder or something like that.
Yeah, but then the meat inside is that animal meat. So you can't put that animal into that.
There were so many laws back then. I'd be breaking all
The
of them.
reason that they're doing this is A, for obedience to God, first of all. But second of all, they didn't have modern refrigeration or all that.
You know, like one of the laws you were saying earlier about, don't touch a beast that had died in the field.
Yeah.
I mean, that's keeping God's keeping disease.
Yeah.
You know.
He's protecting his people. He's not saying these things. Don't do these things. I am an angry God, and I don't want you to have any fun or do anything. No. He's protecting
you from yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, I love you too much to let you eat roadkill. Please do not go eat the roadkill, Paula. Just leave it alone.
I'll try my hardest. Don't want to be a rebellious child.
All right, verse 20 of 23, guys. We're almost there. Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Where are they going? What did God promise to Abraham?
Canaan land, the promised land.
The promised land, right? Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. So whatever angel this was, don't talk bad about this dude, because I'll put you out. But if you carefully obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, I will blot them out. You shall not bow down to their gods nor serve them. This is the key passage right here, guys. You shall not bow down to their gods nor serve them, nor do as they do, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their pillars in pieces. You shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from among you. None shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror before you, and will throw into confusion all the people against whom you shall come. And I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. They're going to run. And I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, Hittites from before you. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply against you. So he's not saying like, hey, I'm not doing this in 1 year, because I haven't told you this yet, but you're not gonna arrive there in 1 year from now. Because if I drive everything out of there right now in 1 year, then it's just gonna be taken over by animals at that point. I will do it when the appropriate time comes. Now, little did they know it was gonna be 40 years later. But little by little, I will drive them out from before you until you have increased and possessed the land. And I will set your border from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates, for I will give the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. And I actually have on bradflight.com/Exodus, kind of up towards the top, a map that shows what the promised land kind of looks like based on that description.
Ain't that kind of neat, though, how he knows in advance that they're going to rebel and treat him so bad, but you know what? He's going to be like, don't worry, I know the ending. I'm going to have people working the land for y'all, even though I know you're fixing to spit in my face.
Correct.
I'm gonna keep it on the stove. It's gonna be on hot for you.
Yeah.
It's crazy. God is so amazing.
Long suffering.
Yes, he is.
God is not out to get us. He's out to love us. We are out to rebel. I mean, that's our nature.
Yeah.
They had one thing that they were told don't do in the garden, and they couldn't do one thing.
Our ancestors, the original ones, couldn't do one thing.
So this doesn't surprise God. It doesn't shock him. It doesn't take him off of his throne. It doesn't make him not in charge. It doesn't give him heartburn. He certainly doesn't enjoy our sin. But he allows for our free will to choose to worship and obey and follow him and love him. Because look, he wants us to choose to stay with the Master. Because we love the Master.
That's good.
Choose this day who you're going to serve.
That's right. Choose this day who you will serve.
went deep, man. That was good.
Very good.
Well, thanks for coming tonight. We'll be back next Monday for Exodus 24, I think. We're going to start getting into the tabernacle, and I've got pictures and charts and all sorts of stuff on that. If you've got anything, bring it as well. But Exodus is becoming, for me, a very strong book. I always knew 10 Commandments in there. It's kind of like, yeah, check the box. Moses, haha, cool, check the box.
You know, I advised somebody tonight, what they told me? They're like, man, I'm tired. Exodus is kind of a boring book. And I said, I go, Exodus actually is one of the most jam-packed with events. You got the 10 Commandments. You got the parting of the Red Sea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pharaoh, the 10 plagues.
Right.
I don't think anybody's talking about
No.
it. You know.
But
No, it's not boring.
we give them opportunities. It's their choice to do what they want to do with it.
You cook, you put the food out,
Mhm.
you try to stuff.
That's right.
That's a good point.
I'm glad all of you are here. Glad you joined us online. We'll see y'all next week.